Two racist cops sprawled broken in a Georgia ditch, blood seeping into cracked earth beneath a stuttering streetlight, their badges dulled by grime. A German shepherd's collar sways on a jagged fence, hinting at a storm nobody predicted. The town buzzes about a black man who vanished after the wreckage, a shadow they underestimated. Everyone thought these officers owned the streets, their hate untouchable. They were wrong. This was just the fuse. What ignited this chaos would reshape lives forever. What happens when the hunted turns hunter? Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice against corruption, hit like and subscribe for more gripping tales like this. 1. Darius Jackson trudged along the dusty back road, slicing through rural Georgia, the sun dipping low, painting the sky in streaks of bruised purple and orange. His boots crunched against the gravel, a steady rhythm matched by the soft panting of Titan, his 6-year-old German shepherd padding beside him. At 42, Darius carried the weight of a life spent in shadows, a Delta Force legend who'd just returned from a grueling covert mission in Somalia, dismantling a pirate ring with nothing but a knife and his wits. Now, all he wanted was the stillness of his cabin, a squat wooden refuge tucked 5 miles outside this small simmering town. The air smelled of pine and dry earth, a faint breeze rustling the overgrown weeds flanking the road. Titan's ears flicked toward the distant croak of bullfrogs, his black and tan coat catching the last glints of daylight. No leash bound him. Years of training had forged an unspoken sync between man and dog, a bond deeper than words. Darius adjusted the hood of his grey sweatshirt, his broad shoulders relaxed, but his dark eyes scanning the horizon out of habit. Overseas, he'd learned to spot threats in the flicker of a curtain or the glint of a barrel. Here in this quiet stretch of his home state, he'd hoped to shed that instinct. 3 weeks back, after months away, he'd craved this routine, long walks with Titan, the crunch of twigs underfoot, the chance to breathe without tasting gunpowder. His cabin sat on 20 acres he'd bought with cash, a sanctuary from a world that never seemed to want him. But even now he felt the prickle of unseen stares, a weight he'd carried since childhood in this town, where folks still whispered about outsiders like him. A low rumble broke the silence, tires grinding against the road behind him. Darius didn't turn, not yet. He knew the sound, a V8 engine, heavy, the kind cops favored. Titan's ears perked, his head tilting slightly, but he stayed at Darius's side, alert yet calm. The cruiser rolled into view, black and white paint chipped along the edges, its headlights slicing through the dusk. It slowed to a crawl, matching Darius's pace, the hum of its motor a quiet taunt. 2 figures sat inside, silhouettes against the glare. Darius kept walking, hands loose at his sides, his pulse steady. He'd faced worse than a patrol car in his time, ambushes in Mogadishu, firefights in Fallujah. This was nothing, or so he told himself. The driver's window slid down, revealing Officer Travis Boone, a wiry man with a buzz cut and a smirk that didn't reach his pale blue eyes. His partner, Officer Kyle Hargrove, lounged in the passenger seat, thicker set, his meaty hand resting on the doorframe, fingers drumming a lazy beat. Boone leaned out, his voice cutting through the evening chill. Well, look what we got here, you lost boy?" The word dripped with venom, a jab Darius had heard 1,000 times growing up black in the South. He stopped, turning slowly to face them, his expression blank. Titan stood still, eyes locked on the cops, a faint rumble stirring in his chest. "'E live here," Darius said, his tone flat, deliberate. 5 miles up the road. Got a cabin off county line." Boone's smirk widened, his gaze raking over Darius's hoodie, his dark skin, the dog at his side. "That so? Don't look like you belong around these parts. What's a fella like you doing out here?" Hargrove chuckled, low and guttural, his fingers pausing their rhythm. "Maybe he's scoping the place out. You know how they get." Darius met Boone's stare, unflinching. "Just walking my dog." He reached into his pocket, slow and careful, pulling out his wallet. "Here's my ID. Says I own the land." Boone took the card, squinting at it like it was written in a foreign tongue. "Darius Jackson, huh? Military vet too? Delta Force? Bullshit. Where'd you steal this from?" He tossed it onto the dashboard, not even pretending to verify it. Hargrove leaned forward, his bulk shifting the cruiser's frame. Fancy papers don't mean squat. Where you really from, huh? Atlanta? Some projects up north? Darius exhaled through his nose, keeping his voice even. Born here, served 12 years, bought the property fair and square. Boone snorted, stepping out of the car, his boots kicking up dust. Sure you did. Probably squatting. We don't take kindly to drifters round here. Hargrove followed, slamming his door shut, his hand hovering near the holster on his hip. Titan's ears flattened, his body tensing, but he didn't move. Boone circled Darius, his posture loose but predatory, like a coyote sizing up prey. That dog ain't leashed. That's a violation right there. What's he trained for, biting folks? Darius kept his eyes on Boone, his voice steady as steel. He's trained to obey. Protection, not attack. He's no threat unless you make him one. Hargrove laughed, a sharp bark of sound. Big words for a guy who don't fit in. Leash that mutt now or we got a problem. Darius pulled a coiled leash from his back pocket, clipping it to Titan's collar with a smooth, practiced motion. There, satisfied? Boone's lips twitched, his hand brushing his baton. Not quite. You got an attitude, Jackson, don't like that. He stepped closer, too close, his breath sour with tobacco. Folks round here don't take to your kind acting like you own the place. Hargrove nodded, his fingers flexing. Maybe he needs a lesson in respect. Darius stood his ground, 6 feet of coiled muscle, his training screaming at him to strike. But he didn't, not yet. I've given you my ID. I'm complying. What's the issue? Boone's smirk vanished, replaced by a snarl. Issues you think you can talk back. He shoved Darius hard, palm slamming into his chest. Darius stumbled, catching himself, his jaw tightening. Titan growled, low and deep, stepping forward, teeth bared just enough to warn. Boone flinched, his hand jerking toward his gun. Control that damn thing. Darius tightened the leash, his voice calm but edged. He's reacting to you, back off and he'll settle. Hargrove's eyes narrowed, his own pistol already half drawn. That a threat? 'Cause I don't play with threats. Before Darius could answer, Boone lunged, grabbing his arm, twisting it back. Titan barked sharp and loud, lunging against the leash to protect his master. Hargrove didn't hesitate. His gun cleared the holster, the barrel flashing in the fading light. A single shot cracked through the air, deafening in the quiet. Titan yelped, a short, piercing sound, then crumpled, blood blooming across his flank. Darius froze, the world tilting, his ears ringing. No! The word tore from his throat, raw and ragged, as he dropped to his knees beside Titan. The dog's eyes met his, wide with shock, then dulled, his body going limp. Boone stepped back, wiping his brow, his voice casual. Self-defense. Damn mutt was gonna bite. Hargrove holstered his gun, smirking. Should have trained it better. Darius's hands pressed against Titan's chest, blood soaking his fingers, warm and sticky. His breath hitched, fury surging through him like a wildfire. He surged up, fists clenched, aiming for Hargrove's smug face. Boone was faster, his taser snapping to life. Blue sparks bit into Darius's side, dropping him to the dirt, muscles seizing, pain exploding through every nerve. He hit the ground, hard gravel biting into his cheek, Titan's lifeless form inches away. Hargrove loomed over him, kicking the leash aside. Told you he'd be trouble. Boone knelt, yanking Darius's arms behind his back, cuffs clicking tight around his wrists. You just assaulted an officer, boy, big mistake. Darius's vision swam, rage and grief choking him, but he couldn't move, couldn't fight. Boone hauled him up, shoving him toward the cruiser, Titan's blood streaking the road behind them. Should have stayed wherever you crawled from, Boone muttered, slamming the door. Hargrove climbed in, chuckling. Look at him, crying over a dog. Pathetic. Darius sat in the back seat, hands bound, staring at Titan's body through the window as the cruiser pulled away. The cops laughed, their voices a dull roar in his ears. His fingers curled into fists, nails digging into his palms until they bled. They thought they'd won, thought they'd broken him. They didn't know who he was. They didn't know what. He'd done in deserts and jungles what he'd survived. They didn't know the storm they'd just unleashed, but they would. Soon they'd learn the cost of crossing Darius Jackson, and it would be a lesson carved in blood. The precinct smelled of stale coffee and bleach, a sterile mask over the rot festering within its cinderblock walls. Darius Jackson sat slumped in the back of Boone and Hargrove's cruiser, wrists chafed raw by steel cuffs, Titan's blood crusting on his knuckles. His head throbbed from the taser's bite, but the real pain gnawed deeper, a hollow ache where his dog's steady presence used to be. The cops hauled him through the station's double doors, Boone gripping his arm like a trophy, Hargrove trailing with a swagger that screamed untouchable. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the booking desk, where a bored sergeant glanced up, barely registering the scene. "Another one, huh?" the man muttered, stamping a form without looking at Darius. Boone smirked, shoving Darius forward. "Caught this one resisting. Had a mutt that tried to take a chunk out of us." Hargrove chuckled, leaning against the counter. "Had to put it down. Public safety, you know." Darius's jaw clenched, his breath shallow, but he kept his eyes forward, locked on a crack in the wall. He'd faced interrogations in hostile territories, stared down men with machetes and machine guns, but this was different. This was home, or what was supposed to be home, and it felt like a trap snapping shut. The sergeant slid a fingerprint, pad across the desk, and Darius pressed his inked fingers against it, leaving smears of Titan's blood alongside the black. Boone noticed, snorting. "Messy bastard. Clean that up later." They dragged him to a holding cell, a 6x8 box with a rusted bench and a flickering bulb. The door clanged shut, and Hargrove's voice echoed through the bars. "Sit. Tight, soldier boy. We'll figure out what to do with you." Hours crawled by, the silence broken only by the drip of a leaky faucet and the distant crackle of a radio. Darius sat still, his mind racing, replaying Titan's final yelp. The way, his body crumpled like a discarded toy. Rage simmered beneath his skin, but he buried it, channeling the discipline that had kept him alive through a decade of war. He wasn't just a grieving man, he was a weapon, and weapons didn't break. They waited. Then, a commotion erupted. Outside the cell block, sharp heels clicking against tile. A voice cutting through the station's hum like a blade through silk. "Where is he? You don't get to play games with me, not today." Lena Jackson stormed in, all 5 feet 6 inches of her radiating fury, her power suit pristine despite the late hour. Darius's younger sister, 38, a civil rights lawyer with a reputation for dismantling corrupt systems, had arrived like a hurricane. Her braids were pulled tight, her brown eyes blazing as she faced the desk sergeant, who shrank under her glare. "Darius Jackson, my brother. You've got him locked up on what? Lies? I want him out. Now." Boone sauntered over, arms crossed, his smirk faltering slightly. "Calm down, lady. He assaulted us, got a dangerous dog too." Lena whipped out her phone, already recording, her voice steady as she live-streamed to her 20,000 followers. "The assault? Let's see the evidence. Oh wait, there isn't any, is there? Just 2 racist cops murdering a man's dog and dragging him in for existing." The sergeant shifted uncomfortably, but Boone doubled down, stepping into her space. "Watch your mouth or you'll join him." Lena didn't flinch, her camera catching every word. "Go ahead, Travis Boone. Threaten me on live video. Show the world what you are." Hargrove hovered behind, his bravado fading as the phone's red dot blinked. Within minutes, the stream exploded online, comments flooding in. "This is Georgia. PD, disgusting. Justice for the dog. Cops at it again." Lena shoved a bail bond form at the sergeant, her voice icy. "Process this. You've got no grounds to hold him." The precinct caved, the sergeant muttering about procedure as he uncuffed Darius 30 minutes later. Lena grabbed his arm, pulling him outside into the humid night air, the live stream still rolling. "They killed Titan," Darius rasped, his voice thick with grief. Lena's face softened for a split second, then hardened again. "I know, and they're gonna pay." She turned the camera on herself. "This is my brother, a Delta Force vet, harassed and cuffed for walking his dog. They shot Titan dead for no reason. Share this, make it loud." The video hit 50,000 views by dawn, the town splitting like a fault line, Some rallied behind Darius, others sneered, their porch lights dimming as they muttered about troublemakers. Back at the precinct, Boone and Hargrove huddled in the break room, coffee cups trembling in their hands. The chief, a grizzled man with a buzz cut and a permanent scowl, stormed in, slamming a tablet on the table. "You idiots! That video's everywhere. Internals suspending you pending review." Boone's face twisted, his voice rising. "Suspended for what?" Some thug mouthed off and his mutt got out of line. Hargrove nodded, his thick neck flushing red. "We were defending ourselves? That's the story." The chief rubbed his temples. "Story's not holding up with a million eyes on it. Lay low till this blows over." Darius sat on his cabin's porch that morning, the wood creaking under his weight, Titan's empty water bowl glinting in the sun. Lena paced nearby, phone buzzing with updates. "They're suspended," she said, a rare smile breaking through. "We've got 'em on the ropes." Darius nodded, a flicker of triumph warming his chest. Maybe this was the start of justice, a crack in their armor. He could almost hear Titan's bark in the wind, urging him on. But that hope shattered. By noon, a local news van rolled up the road, a bleach-blonde reporter stepping out with a cameraman. "Mr. Jackson, care to comment on the officer's side? They say your dog attacked and you resisted arrest." Before Darius could speak, his phone pinged. Lena's eyes widened as she scrolled. "They leaked footage. Doctored. Look." The clip, posted by an anonymous account, showed Titan lunging, teeth flashing, edited to look feral. Boone's voiceover droned, calm and smug. Had no choice, that animal was a threat, owners a loose cannon too. The video spread like wildfire, racking up views faster than Lena's stream. By dusk, the town turned feral itself. A pickup truck roared past Darius's cabin, a rock shattering his window. "Dog killer" scrawled in red paint across his door. Neighbors he'd nodded to for years averted their eyes, crossing the street when he passed. Lena stormed inside, slamming her laptop open. "They flipped it. People believe this garbage over us." Darius stared at the paint, his fists clenching, the suspension sting fading under this new assault. "They're not done," he muttered, his voice low, dangerous. The phone rang, a friend from town whispering, "They're saying you're a liar, Darius. Folks won't sell to you no more. Stores got your picture up." The clerk at the gas station spat in his direction that afternoon, muttering, "Should have stayed gone." Kids threw stones at his truck, their parents watching from porches with cold satisfaction. Darius stood in his kitchen that night, the cabin dark, the silence suffocating without Titan's nails clicking on the floor. Lena sat across from him, her face etched with exhaustion. "We'll fight this," she said, her voice firm. "Expose the edit, sue 'em blind." Darius nodded, but his eyes burned, fixed on the bloody leash coiled on the counter. The suspension had felt like a win, a small taste of retribution. Now it was ash in his mouth, the town's hate a heavier chain than any cuffs. Boone and Hargrove hadn't just killed Titan, they'd turned his home into a battlefield, his name into a curse, and they were laughing somewhere out there thinking they'd buried him. What do you think about this twist? Drop a 1 in the comments if you agree Boone and Hargrove deserve worse than a suspension for framing Darius like this. Smash that like button if you're rooting for him to hit back harder, and subscribe to catch how he turns this mess around. Ever wonder how far a lie can spread before it breaks? What happens when a town picks the wrong man to turn against? Stick around for the next part to find out. Darius Jackson stood in the shadowed husk of his cabin, the air thick with the stench of wet paint and broken glass. Moonlight spilled through the shattered window, glinting off the jagged edges where the rock had landed 2 nights ago, the words "dog killer" still dripping crimson across his door. Titan's leash lay coiled on the counter, a silent accusation, its leather stained dark with his blood. The town's hate pulsed outside, a living thing, its whispers seeping through the walls. Troublemaker. Liar. Should have known his place. Darius's fingers flexed, the grief in his chest hardening into something colder, sharper, a blade forged in the fire of Boone and Hargrove's smug laughter. They'd taken his dog, his peace, his name. Now he'd take something back. Lena had left an hour ago, her voice still ringing in his ears. "We'll sue, Darius. Hit him where it hurts." She'd meant the courts, the slow grind of justice she believed in. But Darius knew better. Justice didn't come from papers and gavels in a town like this, not for a black man with a target on his back. It came from action, from blood. He'd spent 12 years in Delta Force, dismantling threats, with precision, leaving no trace. Boone and Hargrove thought they'd won, thought their suspension was a slap they'd shrug off. They didn't know who they'd crossed. Darius pulled on a black jacket, slipping a folding knife into his pocket, its weight familiar, comforting. Tonight he'd start with Boone. He'd tracked the cop for days, mapping his habits with the same meticulous care he'd used to hunt warlords in Kandahar. Boone liked his whiskey cheap and his nights loud, a regular at Rusty's Tavern, a dive bar on the edge of town where the jukebox wailed and the air reeked of stale beer. Darius moved through the woods flanking his property, a ghost in the dark, his boots silent on the pine needles. The bar sat 3 miles west, its neon sign buzzing like a dying fly against the night sky. He crouched behind a rusted dumpster, watching Boone's cruiser roll into the gravel lot at 10 sharp. The cop stepped out, arm in a sling from some work injury he'd bragged about, his buzz cut catching the glow of a street lamp. Alone, perfect. Boone swaggered inside, his laughter cutting through the muffled twang of country music. Darius waited, counting minutes, letting the cop settle into his routine. At 11:30, Boone stumbled out the back door, a bottle dangling from his good hand, his steps unsteady. The alley stretched behind the bar, narrow and unlit, flanked by brick walls and overflowing trash cans. No cameras, no witnesses, just the hum of crickets and the distant bark of a stray dog. Darius slipped from his cover, a shadow blending with the night, his pulse steady as he closed the distance. Boone fumbled with his keys, cursing under his breath, oblivious to the figure stalking him. Darius struck like a cobra, silent and swift. His boot caught Boone's knee, buckling it, sending the cop crashing to the gravel with a choked grunt. The bottle shattered, amber liquid pooling beneath him. Before Boone could scream, Darius's hand clamped over his mouth, the knife flashing to his throat, its edge kissing skin. "This is for Titan," Darius whispered, his voice a low growl, thick with rage. Boone's eyes widened, pupils dilated with booze and terror, but he didn't recognize the face under the hood. Darius twisted Boone's slung arm, snapping the bone with a wet crunch, muffling the cop's howl against his palm. Pain was the message, not death, not yet. He released Boone, letting him slump to the ground, gasping, clutching his shattered arm. Darius melted back into the dark, his breath even, his hands steady. The cop writhed, spitting curses into the night, but he'd live. Darius hiked back to his cabin, the adrenaline fading, a grim satisfaction settling in. One down, he'd hit. Hargrove next. Make them both feel the weight of their sins. The woods swallowed his footsteps, the town oblivious to the storm brewing in its midst. By dawn, he'd cleaned his knife, scrubbed the dirt from his boots, and sat on his porch, waiting. For the fallout, it came faster than he'd expected. Sirens wailed through the morning mist, red and blue lights flashing down the road. Darius stepped outside, squinting as 2 cruisers screeched to a halt, deputies spilling out, guns drawn. "Hands up, Jackson!" one barked, a wiry kid with a nervous twitch. Darius complied, slow and deliberate, his mind racing. They couldn't know it was him. Not this quick. The deputies cuffed him again, rougher this time, shoving him against his truck. "Where were you last night?" the kid demanded, his voice cracking. "Home," Darius said, calm as stone. "Alone." They hauled him back to the precinct, the same stale air greeting him like an old enemy. Boone sat in the break room, arm resplinted, his face pale but twisted with fury. Hargrove paced beside him, barking into a radio. Some bastard jumped. "Me," Boone snarled to the chief, who'd stormed in, tie askew. "Broke my damn arm worse. Had to be that Jackson punk." Hargrove nodded, his thick neck bulging. "He's got motive, dog and all." The chief glared at Darius through the cell bars. "No proof ties you to it yet, but you're on thin ice." They cut him loose an hour later, lack of evidence their only restraint. Darius walked home, the sun climbing high, his brief triumph souring. He'd wanted Boone to hurt, to fear, but the cop's ego hadn't cracked. It had hardened. That night, the news blared a different story. Jamal Carter, a black mechanic who'd clashed with Boone over a towed car last year, had been arrested for the assault. Darius froze, staring at the TV in his cabin, the reporter's voice droning. Police found a wrench matching the attack in Carter's shop. He's in custody, facing felony charges. Jamal's mugshot flashed, his eyes wide with confusion, his wife sobbing in the background. Darius's stomach twisted, guilt clawing at him. He knew Jamal, good man. Fixed his truck once, never backed down from Boone's harassment. This was a frame job, pure and simple. He grabbed his phone, pulling up the precinct's public logs, hacked with skills he'd honed overseas. There, it was Boone's report, claiming Jamal ambushed him with tools consistent with his trade. Evidence planted, witnesses coerced. Darius's attack had ricocheted, hitting an innocent man. He slammed the phone down, his breath ragged, the cabin's walls closing in. The retaliation didn't stop there. At midnight, engines roared outside, headlights flooding his yard. Darius peered through the blinds, heart pounding. 3 trucks circled his property, men in hoods piling out, their voices a drunken chorus of hate. "Come out, Jackson, you and your kind ain't welcome." A Molotov cocktail sailed through the air, smashing against his porch, flames licking up the wood. He grabbed a fire extinguisher, dousing the blaze, but the mob wasn't done. They torched Jamal's garage next, a mile away, the sky glowing orange as sirens wailed too late. Darius stood in the ashes of his porch, the extinguisher clattering to the ground, his hands trembling not with fear, but with fury. The news replayed. The fire. Hargrove's face filling the screen, his voice oily with false concern. "Looks like folks took justice into their own hands. Can't say I blame him after what happened to Boone." The reporter nodded, oblivious to the lie. Carter's arrest and this vigilante act suggest a community fed up with crime. Darius's fists clenched, nails drawing blood. His strike had been clean, surgical, but they'd turned it into chaos, punishing Jamal, burning his world. He sank onto the charred steps, the night pressing in, the town's pulse a drumbeat of malice. Boone's vow echoed in his head, overheard at the precinct. "I'll find the real bastard who did this." Hargrove had grinned, clapping his partner's good shoulder. "We'll make 'em all pay." Darius's revenge had sparked something. Bigger, uglier, a fire he couldn't control. Jamal's life was collateral damage, his garage a smoldering ruin, and the cops were still standing, their power flexing harder, their eyes hunting him. This wasn't justice. It was war, and he'd just lost the first battle. But wars weren't won in a night. He'd hit back, smarter, deadlier. They'd regret lighting this fuse. Darius Jackson crouched over his laptop in the dim glow of his cabin, the charred porch boards creaking under his weight. The screen flickered, casting sharp shadows across his face, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. Jamal's arrest gnawed at him, a festering wound beside Titan's death. The town's hate a suffocating fog he couldn't outrun. The news looped footage of the mechanic's garage burning, orange flames licking the sky, while Boone's smug voice claimed justice had been served. Darius's fingers danced across the keys, hacking into the precinct's server with skills honed in Delta Force ops rooms. He needed proof, something to clear Jamal, to turn this mess back on the cops who'd lit the match. The precinct's cameras were a goldmine, poorly secured, their feeds a window into Boone and Hargrove's lies. Darius found it after an hour. Grainy footage from Boone's body cam, time-stamped the night of the alley attack. It showed the cop planting a wrench in Jamal's truck, his sling barely hiding the smirk as he muttered, "This'll stick." Hargrove's laugh crackled through the audio. "Teach 'em all a lesson." Darius's pulse quickened, his breath catching. This was it, irrefutable evidence of the frame job. He downloaded the clip, encrypted it, and uploaded it to a whistleblower site, tagging local news outlets with an anonymous tip. "Racist cops framed innocent black man. See for yourself." By morning, the video exploded online, racking up 100,000 views before the sun crested the pines. Headlines screamed, "Georgia PD caught planting evidence. Innocent mechanic targeted." Protesters gathered outside the station, signs waving, voices chanting Jamal's name. Lena burst through Darius's door at noon, her suit rumpled, her phone buzzing with alerts. "You did this?" she asked, half accusing, half awed. Darius nodded, leaning back in his chair, a flicker of triumph warming his chest. "Had to. For Jamal." Lena scrolled her feed, a rare grin breaking through. "They're releasing him. Charges dropped. You're a damn genius." Jamal walked free that afternoon, his wife sobbing into his shoulder as cameras flashed. The town split wider, some cheering his release, others spitting venom about thugs getting off easy. Darius watched from his porch, the weight lifting slightly, a taste of victory after weeks of ash. Boone and Hargrove's suspension deepened, the chief issuing a terse statement about ongoing investigations. Lena clapped Darius's shoulder, her voice firm. "We're winning, brother. They're scrambling." He almost believed her, the air feeling lighter. Titan's ghost, a little quieter. But victory was a fragile thing in a town built on quicksand. That night, his burner phone pinged, a text from an unknown number. "Got info on Titan's killers. Meet me at the old mill midnight. Come alone." Darius's gut twisted, suspicion flaring, but the lure was too strong. What if it was real? What if someone knew more? He geared up, slipping a Glock into his waistband, a flashlight into his pocket, his Delta Force instincts humming. The mill sat 10 miles north, a crumbling relic of Georgia's cotton days, its silos sagging against the stars. He drove in silence, parking a quarter-mile out, hiking the rest through thick underbrush, the night alive with cicadas and rustling leaves. The mill loomed ahead, its broken windows gaping like empty eyes, the air heavy with mildew and rust. Darius circled the perimeter, boots silent on the cracked concrete, his flashlight off, relying on moonlight. A figure waited near the loading dock, shrouded in a hoodie, hands in pockets. "You, Jackson?" the man rasped, voice low. Darius stepped closer, cautious, his hand brushing the Glock. "Yeah. You got something for me?" The figure nodded, pulling a folded paper from his jacket. Proof, names, dates. They bragged about it. Darius reached for it, his fingers grazing. The edge when the trap sprang. Floodlights blazed, blinding him, tires screeching as 2 trucks roared from the shadows. Boone and Hargrove leapt out, guns drawn, flanked by 4 deputies in tactical vests, their faces twisted with hate. "Surprise, asshole!" Boone snarled, his splinted arm trembling with rage. Hargrove grinned, his pistol steady. "Thought you'd play hero, huh?" Darius dropped the paper, diving behind a rusted silo as bullets cracked the air, concrete chips stinging his face. The informant bolted, a plant, his footsteps fading into the night. This wasn't a meeting, it was an execution. Darius rolled, drawing his Glock, firing 2 shots that pinged off a truck's hood, scattering the deputies. His training kicked in, muscle memory from a dozen war zones guiding him. He darted between silos, their hulking forms shielding him, his breath steady despite the chaos. Boone's voice boomed, "You're dead, Jackson, nowhere to run." Hargrove fired wildly, rounds chewing through metal, his laughter sharp and unhinged. Darius flanked them, slipping into a collapsed shed. Its roof caved in, giving him a vantage point. He lined up a shot, aiming for Boone's leg, but a deputy tackled him from the side, slamming him to the ground. The fight was brutal, fists and boots raining down. Darius twisted, snapping the deputy's wrist, shoving him off, but another piled on, a knee crushing his ribs. Boone loomed overhead, baton swinging, cracking against Darius's shoulder, pain exploding white-hot. "This is for my arm, you bastard!" Hargrove joined in, kicking Darius's side, each blow a thunderclap of agony. Darius fought back, elbowing a deputy's jaw, shattering teeth, but the numbers overwhelmed him. 5 against 1, their rage a tidal wave, their slurs a venomous chant. "Stay down, boy. Know your place." He clawed for his gun, fingers brushing the grip. When Hargrove's pistol barked, the bullet grazed his skull, a searing line of fire, blood trickling warm down his temple. Darius staggered, vision blurring, his body screaming to collapse. Boone laughed, a hollow, victorious sound. "Finish him." Hargrove aimed again, but a deputy hesitated, muttering, "Too messy, man, he's done." They stepped back, watching Darius slump against the silo, his breath ragged, blood pooling beneath him. "Let the buzzards have him," Boone spat, wiping his baton on his pants. Hargrove nodded, holstering his gun. "Nobody'll find him out here." The posse piled into their trucks, engines roaring as they peeled out, dust swirling in their wake. Darius lay still, the mill's silence swallowing him, the night pressing in cold and heavy. His chest heaved, shallow gasps, the grays wound throbbing, his ribs cracked, his shoulder useless. He'd cleared Jamal, struck a blow, but this was their answer. A trap, a beating, a bullet meant to kill. They'd left him for dead, thinking they'd won, their power flexing harder than ever. But Darius wasn't dead. Not yet. Pain sharpened. His resolve, his delta force will clawing through the haze. He dragged himself upright, leaning on the silo, blood dripping onto the concrete. He stumbled into the woods, each step a battle, his vision doubling, then clearing. He found a creek, splashing water on his face, the sting waking him, grounding him. His phone was gone, lost in the fight, but he knew the terrain, knew how to vanish. They'd underestimated him again, assumed a graze and a beating would finish. What Titan's death started. They were wrong. Darius hid in a hollowed oak, catching his breath, his mind racing. This wasn't over. Boone and Hargrove had drawn first blood, turned a skirmish into a war. He'd heal, regroup, strike back. Next time, they wouldn't walk away. What do you say about Darius taking this fight to the edge? Drop a 1 in the comments if you think he should have seen that trap coming after Boone's last move. Hit that like button if you're cheering for him to survive and make these cops pay double, and subscribe to see how he claws back from this. Could a man like Darius really turn this ambush into their downfall? What happens when the hunted becomes the hunter again? Stay tuned for the next part to find out. Darius Jackson staggered through the Georgia woods, the night a blur of pain and shadow, his boots sinking into damp earth with every labored step. Blood trickled from the graze wound on his temple, matting his hair, stinging his eyes, while his cracked ribs screamed with each breath. The mill's ambush had left him broken but alive, Boone and Hargrove's laughter still echoing in his skull as they'd driven off, certain he'd bleed out under the stars. He'd crawled from that ditch, fueled by a fire they couldn't extinguish, his delta force training a lifeline pulling him through the haze. Dawn broke grey and cold, the horizon smudged with mist, when he stumbled into a clearing 3 miles from the mill. A shack loomed ahead, its tin roof sagging, windows boarded with splintered plywood. Darius's vision swam, but he recognized it. A hunter's hideout he'd scouted months ago. He collapsed against the door, his shoulder throbbing where Boone's baton had landed, his fingers fumbling for the lockpick in his pocket. The tumblers clicked and he shoved inside, the air thick with dust and mildew. A cot sat in the corner, a rusted sink against the wall. He sank onto the mattress, his breath ragged, and ripped a strip from his shirt, pressing it to his head. Blood soaked through, but the flow slowed, his pulse steadying. He'd survived worse, a shrapnel blast in Helmand, a knife fight in Bogota. This wouldn't kill him. Not yet. Footsteps crunched outside, sharp and deliberate. Darius tensed, hand sliding to the Glock he'd kept through the fight, its weight a cold comfort. The door creaked open, and Lena stepped in, her suit jacket torn, her braids loose, a first aid kit clutched in her arms. Behind her stood a man in a deputy's uniform, lean and wiry, his badge glinting faintly. "Jesus, Darius," Lena gasped, dropping to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as she opened the kit. "Found you on the tracker app." "What the hell happened?" Darius exhaled, lowering the gun. "Boone, Hargrove, set me up at the mill, nearly finished me." The deputy lingered by the door, his hazel eyes wary, his voice low. "Carter, Josh Carter. Heard the chatter on the radio. They're saying you're dead." Darius studied him, suspicion prickling. "And you're here. Why?" Carter shifted, his jaw tight. "I hate Boone's guts. Been on the force 5 years. Watched him and Hargrove run this town like their personal playground. Figured you might need a friend." Lena dabbed antiseptic on Darius's wound, her touch firm despite the shake in her fingers. "He's clean. I checked him out. He's got dirt on them, files, recordings, we can use it." Darius winced as the sting bit deep, but his mind sharpened. "What kind of dirt?" Carter pulled a thumb drive from his pocket, tossing it onto the cot. Audio from their cruiser. Caught him planning to frame Jamal, bragging about Titan. Dates back years. Other arrests, beatings, all swept under the rug. Lena's eyes blazed, her voice rising. "This is gold, Darius. We sue the department, take it public. They're done." Darius nodded, a plan forming, fragile but real. "We hit 'em hard, legal. Make it stick." Carter cracked a grim smile. "I'm in, just don't get me killed." They holed up in the shack for 3 days, Darius healing under Lena's care, his ribs bandaged, his shoulder braced. Carter slipped back to the precinct, feeding them intel. Boone and Hargrove were lying low, the chief scrambling to contain the mill fallout. Lena drafted a lawsuit, her laptop glowing late into the night, weaving Carter's evidence into a case that could topple the department. Excessive force, falsified evidence, racial profiling, she muttered, typing furiously. "We've got 'em cold." Darius cleaned his Glock, his voice steady. "File it, let's see 'em squirm." The lawsuit hit the courts on the 4th day, a 50-page bombshell backed by Carter's files. Lena leaked it to the press, headlines erupting. Georgia cop sued for decades of abuse. Delta vet fights back. Protests swelled outside the precinct, tires screeching as news vans clogged the streets. The chief called a press conference, his face ashen, promising full transparency. Boone and Hargrove's names splashed. Across every screen, their suspension now a public disgrace. Darius watched from the shack, a flicker of triumph warming his bruised chest. "We're winning," Lena said, squeezing his hand. "They can't bury this." For a moment it felt true. The town buzzed, some cheering Darius as a hero, others cursing him louder, but the pressure mounted. Carter returned that night, his uniform wrinkled, his eyes darting. "They're spooked. Chiefs talking federal. Oversight? You've got him on the ropes." Darius almost smiled, the weight of Titan's loss easing, justice inching closer. But Boone and Hargrove weren't men who bent. They broke things. The next morning, Carter didn't show. Darius's burner pinged with a grainy photo. Carter sprawled in his kitchen, blood pooling under his head, a gun in his limp hand. "Drug bust gone wrong," the caption read. Lena gasped, her laptop clattering to the floor. No, they didn't." Darius's jaw clenched, his voice ice. "They did." He hacked the precinct's logs again, fury guiding his fingers. The bust was staged, Boone's signature on the report, Hargrove's squad listed as backup. They'd raided Carter's home, planted drugs, shot him point blank, and burned his evidence stash. The chief called it tragic, pinning Carter as a dirty cop. Darius slammed the laptop shut, his hands trembling, guilt crashing over him. Carter had trusted him, risked everything, and now he was dead. His betrayal a bullet Boone had fired without blinking. The shack's silence, shattered at dusk. Sirens blaring as a SWAT team descended on Darius's cabin 5 miles away. He and Lena watched from a ridge, binoculars pressed to their eyes as armored figures smashed through his door. "Anonymous tip," the radio crackled. "Drug lab on Jackson's property." Darius's stomach dropped. They'd planted evidence. Again, this time on him. Flashlights swept his yard, uncovering baggies of white powder stashed in his shed. Hargrove's work, no doubt. The team tore through his home, ripping apart Titan's bed, shattering what little he had left. Lena gripped his arm, her voice shaking. "We've got to run." Darius bolted, pulling Lena through the woods, his ribs aching, his head pounding. They reached a dry creek bed, ducking under a fallen oak as helicopter blades thumped overhead, searchlights slashing the trees. "They're pinning it all on you," Lena whispered, her breath ragged. "Carter, the drugs, everything." Darius nodded, his mind racing, the lawsuit's promise crumbling. He'd escaped, but the cost was steep. Carter's life, Lena's safety, his last shred of home. The radio crackled again, Boone's voice smug through the static. "Jackson's a ghost now, let him rot out there." They hid in a drainage pipe, the cold metal biting into their skin, the chopper's roar fading into the night. Lena's eyes glistened, her voice breaking. "I thought we had him." Darius stared into the dark, his fists clenched, blood crusting under his nails. "We did. They just hit harder." The alliance had been his lifeline, Carter's evidence a beacon, Lena's law a shield. Now it was Ash, the cop's power flexing like a noose tightening around his neck. Boone and Hargrove hadn't just killed a deputy, they'd torched his hope, framed him as a fugitive, and laughed while doing it. Darius's breath steadied, his Delta Force resolve locking back into place. They'd taken his dog, his ally, his home, but they hadn't taken him. Not yet. He'd lost this round, the lawsuit of false dawns snuffed out by blood and fire. But wars weren't won with one strike. He'd regroup, find a new angle, make them pay double. Boone and Hargrove thought they'd buried him in that pipe, thought their gloating would echo unchallenged. They were wrong. Darius Jackson was still, breathing, still fighting, and the next blow would be theirs to feel. Darius Jackson crouched in the drainage pipe, the cold steel biting into his knees, his breath fogging in the damp air. Lena huddled beside him, her suit jacket soaked, her eyes wide with fear as the helicopter's blades thumped overhead, its searchlight slicing through the night. The SWAT raid had torched his cabin, planted drugs painting him as a kingpin, Carter's blood still fresh on Boone and Hargrove's hands. Darius's ribs ached, his head throbbed from the mill ambush, but his mind was a steel trap, plotting, waiting. The chopper veered west, its roar fading, leaving only the chirp of crickets and Lena's shallow gasps. "They think we're gone," she whispered, her voice trembling. Darius nodded, his jaw tight. "Not yet." He led her out at dawn, navigating the woods by memory, his Delta Force instincts guiding them to a derelict barn 10 miles south. The structure sagged, its red paint peeling, hay bales rotting in the corners. They slipped inside, the air thick with mold and dust, and Darius rigged a laptop from his go bag, hacking into the precinct's body cam archives. "Need proof," he muttered, fingers flying over the keys. "Something to flip this." Lena paced, her heels sinking into the dirt floor. "They've got the town eating out of their hands. We're fugitives now." The footage loaded, choppy but damning. Hargrove planting baggies in Darius's shed, Boone barking orders to make it stick. Darius uploaded it to a dark web forum, tagging activist groups with a burner account. "Framed by Georgia PD, spread this." By noon, the video hit social media, racking up views like wildfire. Protests erupted outside the precinct, fists pounding the air, voices shouting, "Free Jackson! Jail the cops!" News vans swarmed, reporters clutching mics, their headlines screaming, "New evidence exposes police corruption." Delta vet targeted. Darius watched from the barn, a grim satisfaction settling in. "They're rattled," he said, cracking his knuckles. Lena nodded, her lips curving slightly. This might work. The chief held a press conference. That afternoon, his tie crooked, sweat beading on his brow. "We're investigating these claims thoroughly. No one's above the law." Boone and Hargrove's faces flashed on screen. Their suspension now a national scandal, federal agents rumored to be inbound. Darius felt a surge of triumph, the town's grip loosening, justice clawing closer. Lena squeezed his shoulder, her voice steady. "We're turning the tide, brother." For a fleeting moment, the barn felt less like a hideout and more like a war room, Titan's death a rallying cry echoing beyond Georgia's pines. But Boone and Hargrove didn't bend under pressure. They broke things. That night, engines growled in the distance, headlights piercing the dusk as Darius peered through the barn's slats. 3 trucks rolled into view, men piling out, their hoods stark white against the darkening sky. A militia, born from the town's racist underbelly, rallied by the cops' whispers. Boone stepped from the lead vehicle, his splinted arms stiff, his voice booming. "Jackson's a cop-killing terrorist. Bounty's 10 grand dead or alive." Hargrove flanked him, shotgun in hand, his grin wide. "Time to clean house." Darius's stomach dropped, his hand tightening on his Glock. Lena froze, her breath catching. "They're hunting us." The militia fanned out, torches flickering, their chants a venomous roar. "Get the bastard! No place for his kind!" Darius grabbed Lena, pulling her toward the back exit, but the mob was faster. A Molotov cocktail crashed through the barn's roof, flames erupting, hay igniting with a whoosh. Heat seared Darius's skin as he shoved Lena through a gap in the wall, bullets pinging off the wood behind them. They sprinted into the woods, branches clawing at their faces, the fire's glow painting the night orange. The militia didn't stop at the barn. They stormed Darius's cabin next, its smoldering ruins a beacon 5 miles north. Darius watched. From a ridge, binoculars trembling in his hands as they doused the wreckage with gasoline, flames swallowing what little he'd had left. "Burn it all!" Boone shouted, his silhouette stark against the blaze. Hargrove laughed, tossing a brick through the last intact window, glass shattering like a gunshot. The mob cheered, their torches waving, a lynch mob in all but name. Darius's fists clenched, nails drawing blood, his home reduced to ash, his sanctuary a grave. They hid in a ravine, mud caking their clothes, the night pressing in cold and heavy. Lena's phone buzzed, a shaky video loading, the militia outside the precinct, Boone's voice crackling through a megaphone. "Jackson's a threat to us. All, we're taking back our town." The clip cut to a live stream, Hargrove stepping forward, his shotgun raised. "He's got help. His sister's in on it. Bring them both in." The screen shifted, a hooded figure dragging Lena from a jail cell. Her wrists bound, her face bruised, blood trickling from her lip. "Surrender, Jackson," Boone sneered into the camera. "Or she's next." Darius's heart stopped, his breath hitching, the phone slipping from his hand. "They took you?" he rasped, turning to Lena, who stared at the screen, her face pale. "That's old footage. From a protest last year. They're faking it." Her voice shook, but her eyes hardened. "They're baiting you." Darius nodded, his mind racing, the video a lie, but the threat real. The militia had raided the jail, hacked the system, turned his sister into a pawn. He'd exposed the raid, sparked outrage, but this was their counterstrike, a town turned predator, a bounty on his head, Lena's life a bargaining chip. They moved deeper into the ravine, the stream's gurgle masking their steps, the militia's chants fading into the wind. Darius rigged a tarp from his go-bag, shielding them from the drizzle, his Glock resting on his knee. "They've got numbers now," he muttered, his voice low, dangerous. "Hundreds, maybe." Lena wiped mud from her face, her jaw tight. "We've got the feds coming. That video's too big to ignore." Darius shook his head, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Won't be fast enough. They're not stopping till I'm dead." The next morning, the news confirmed it. "Vigilante group targets fugitive Jackson," the anchor blared, footage showing hooded men patrolling the streets, rifles gleaming. Boone and Hargrove stood among them, their badges gone but their power reborn. The town's racists a militia at their command. "He's a terrorist," Hargrove told a reporter, his voice oily with false concern. "We're protecting our community." The anchor nodded, oblivious to the lie. "Federal agents are en route, but locals say they'll handle it themselves." Darius sat under the tarp, the rain drumming above, his hands trembling not with fear but with fury. The video had been his win, a crack in their armor, protests a fleeting shield. Now it was a noose, the town a hunting ground, Lena's face on every screen, a taunt he couldn't unsee. Boone and Hargrove hadn't just framed him. They'd weaponized the community, turned neighbors into killers, their hate a tidal wave crashing over him. He'd lost his cabin, his ally, his freedom, and now his sister dangled on their string, real or not. He checked his Glock, the clip full, his resolve hardening. "We can't hide forever," Lena said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion, etching her face. "They'll find us." Darius nodded, his eyes burning, Titan's ghost howling in his mind. "They want a fight, they'll get one." The militia thought they'd cornered him, thought their numbers would crush him. They didn't know what he'd survived, what he'd become. This wasn't just a war now, it was a slaughter waiting to happen, and he'd make sure they bled for every step they took. What's your take on this town turning on Darius like a pack of wolves? Drop a 1 in the comments if you think Boone and Hargrove deserve to face the feds for unleashing this chaos. Smash that like button if you're rooting for Darius to outsmart this mob, and subscribe to see how he fights back from the brink. Can a man alone really stand against a whole town gone rogue? What happens when the prey decides to bite back twice as hard? Catch the next part to find out. Darius Jackson knelt in the ravine, rain drumming against the tarp overhead, his Glock resting heavy in his lap. Lena sat beside him, her face streaked with mud. her eyes locked on the grainy live stream still looping on her phone. Her own bruised image, wrists bound, Boone's voice snarling, "Surrender, Jackson, or she's next." The militia's fake video had lit a fuse in his chest, rage and fear twisting into a knot he couldn't untie. "It's not real," Lena insisted, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. "They're bluffing." Darius nodded, his jaw tight, but the threat gnawed at him. Real or not, they'd made it personal, turned his sister into bait. He wouldn't let them touch her. The militia's hideout was a derelict barn 10 miles east, a twin to the one they'd burned, its silhouette jagged against the dawn. Darius had tracked their movements for hours, hacking radio chatter with his laptop, pinpointing their base from Boone's boasts. "We've got him running scared now." Lena gripped his arm, her voice low. "You can't go in there alone. They're waiting for you." Darius shook his head, checking his Glock's clip, his Delta Force resolve locking into place. "They've got numbers, I've got training. I'm getting you out of this one way or another." She exhaled, her eyes glistening, but she didn't argue. She knew him too well. He moved at dusk, a shadow in the woods, his black jacket blending with the pines, his boots silent on the wet earth. The barn loomed ahead, its walls weathered gray, torchlight flickering through cracked planks. 2 guards patrolled the perimeter, rifles slung low, their hoods stark against the gloom. Darius counted 10 more inside, their voices a drunken rumble. Boone and Hargrove's laughter cutting through the noise. He circled wide, planting tripwires from his go-bag, thin strands of wire rigged with flashbangs stolen from a mission years ago. Distraction was his edge. The first guard fell silently, Darius's arms snapping around his neck, a chokehold dropping him limp in the mud. The second turned too late, a knife sinking into his thigh, a muffled grunt escaping before Darius knocked him cold with the Glock's butt. He dragged them into the brush, their radios crackling static, buying him minutes. The barn's back door hung loose, rusted hinges creaking as he slipped inside, the air thick with sweat and gasoline. Hooded figures sprawled across hay bales, bottles clinking, rifles propped against walls. Boone stood near a table, his splintered arms stiff, barking orders. Hargrove lounged beside him, shotgun across his lap, his grin wide as he swigged whiskey. Darius spotted Lena's double, a woman in a wig, tied to a chair in the corner, her sobs staged, a camera rolling beside her. The ruse was clever, but it wouldn't hold him back. He triggered the tripwires, flashbangs exploding outside, light and sound shattering the night. The militia scrambled, shouting, "He's here!" "Get him!" Darius moved like a wraith, weaving through the chaos, his Glock barking twice, dropping 2 men before they could aim. Boone roared, "Find that bastard!" Hargrove fired blindly, pellets shredding a wall, hay dust choking the air. Darius reached the double, cutting her ropes with his knife, her eyes wide with terror. "Run!" he hissed, shoving her toward the door. She bolted, a decoy he didn't need. He flanked the table, tackling Boone from behind, slamming him face first into the wood, the cop's nose crunching, blood spraying. Hargrove swung his shotgun, but Darius ducked, driving a knee into his gut, the air whooshing from his lungs. The militia rallied, boots pounding, rifles cracking, but Darius was faster, rolling behind a barrel, firing precise shots. 3 more. Down, their screams swallowed by the barn's roar. He grabbed Boone by the collar, dragging him toward the exit, Hargrove staggering after them, clutching his side. "You're dead, Jackson!" Boone spat, blood bubbling from his lips. Darius didn't answer, kicking the back door open, shoving Boone into the mud as he sprinted for the trees. Lena met him at the ridge, her breath ragged, her eyes wide. "You got him?" Darius nodded, hauling Boone along, the cop's curses. A weak gurgle. They reached a dry creek bed 5 miles west, a safe house Darius had scouted weeks ago, a cinder-block shed, its walls mossy, its roof intact. Inside, Lena sank against the wall, her hands shaking. "We're clear, you did it!" Darius tied Boone to a chair, the cop's head lolling, his eyes glassy with pain. "Not yet," Darius muttered, checking his Glock, the adrenaline fading. Her fragile hope settling in. He'd rescued Lena from their lie, turned their trap into his win. "We've got leverage now," he said, taping Boone's mouth, the cop's muffled groans a sweet sound. Lena nodded, her voice soft. Let's get out of Georgia. Hide until the feds come. Darius almost agreed. The shed a fleeting sanctuary. Titan's ghost a quiet shadow at his side. But Boone's eyes glinted, a smirk twitching beneath the tape, a promise of something worse. Hours later, sirens wailed, red and blue lights flashing through the shed's cracks. Darius peered out, his stomach dropping. A dozen cruisers surrounded them, SWAT teams fanning out, rifles trained on the shed. "Darius Jackson!" A megaphone blared. "You're under arrest for Deputy Carter's murder," Lena gasped, her phone buzzing with a news alert. "Fugitive Jackson kills cop in daring raid." Darius's mind raced, replaying the barn fight, no deputies among the fallen. This was a frame deeper, deadlier. Boone chuckled through the tape, his eyes gleaming. A trap within a trap. Darius ripped it off, grabbing his collar. "What did you do?" Boone spat blood, his voice raspy. "Planted your DNA on Carter's body, hair from your cabin. You're a cop killer now." Hargrove's voice crackled over the radio outside, smug and loud. "He ambushed us, took Boone, killed a deputy in cold blood." Darius's fists clenched, his breath hitching, the rescue's triumph crumbling. SWAT breached the door, battering it down, flashlights blinding him as Lena screamed, "He's innocent!" They dragged him out, cuffs biting his wrists. Boone, staggering free, playing the victim with a limp. Lena fought, clawing at a trooper, but they shoved her back, her cries swallowed by the chaos. "You've got the wrong man," she yelled, her voice breaking. The SWAT commander, a stone-faced man with a buzz cut, glared at Darius. "DNA don't lie, you're done." Darius's head pounded, blood crusting his temple, his ribs a cage of pain. He'd saved Lena, beaten Boone, thought he'd won. Now, he was a murderer. The militias lie a noose tightening around his neck. They threw him into a cruiser, the shed receding, Lena's silhouette fading in the rain. Boone climbed into another car, Hargrove clapping his shoulder, their laughter a knife in Darius's gut. The news van nearby filmed it all, the anchor's voice droning. Jackson, wanted for drug crimes, now linked to a deputy's death. The frame was perfect. Boone's DNA plant a masterstroke, the militia's chaos a shield. Darius's hands trembled, not with fear but with fury, his Delta Force mind racing. He'd escaped their trap, only to fall into a deeper one, his victory a death sentence. Lena's words echoed, "Get out of Georgia." But it was too late. The cruiser rumbled toward the precinct, the town a blur of hate outside the window, faces he'd once nodded to, now twisted with rage. Boone and Hargrove had turned his rescue into a manhunt, their power flexing harder, the state their weapon. Darius stared at his cuffed hands, blood under his nails, Titan's ghost howling in his mind. They thought they'd buried him. Thought. This was checkmate. They didn't know he'd survived worse, that he'd break these chains. The war wasn't over, it was just beginning, and they'd bleed for every lie they'd spun. Darius Jackson sat in the back of the SWAT cruiser, the steel cuffs cutting into his wrists, his breath fogging the window as the Georgia night blurred past. The precinct loomed ahead, its concrete bulk a fortress of lies. Boone and Hargrove's, laughter still ringing in his ears from the shed. They'd framed him for Carter's murder, planted his DNA, turned his rescue into a death warrant. His ribs ached, his temple throbbed from the mill's graze, but his mind was a razor, slicing. Through the chaos, he'd escaped their traps before, broken their holds, survived their bullets. This wasn't over. The cruiser screeched to a halt, deputies yanking him out, their boots grinding gravel as they shoved him toward the station. Inside, the air reeked of sweat and ink, fluorescent lights buzzing like a swarm of flies. They threw him into an interrogation room, a grey box with a scratched table and a one-way mirror reflecting his battered face. Blood crusting his hair, bruises blooming purple across his jaw. The SWAT commander stormed in, a stocky man with a buzz cut, his voice clipped. "DNA ties you to Carter's body, hair from your cabin. You're looking at life, Jackson." Darius leaned back, his eyes steady, his voice low. "Planted. You know it. I didn't kill him." The commander snorted, tossing a file on the table, photos spilling out. Carter's corpse, a bullet hole in his skull. Darius's hair, found, clutched in his hand. "Evidence says otherwise." Darius's fists clenched, his nails digging into his palms. but he kept his face blank. Boone and Hargrove had spun a web, the militia their muscle, the precinct their shield. Lena's screams echoed in his head, her forced disavowal on the news, a knife twisting deeper. "I don't know what he's become," she'd said, her voice breaking, a lie to save herself. He didn't blame her. She'd had no choice. But the isolation burned, Titan's absence a void beside him, Carter's death a weight he couldn't shake. He needed to flip this, fast. "Check the timelines," he said, his tone ice. "I was running from your raid when Carter died." "Boone's playing you." The commander hesitated, a flicker of doubt, but he walked out, slamming the door. Hours bled into the night, the precinct humming with tension, deputies whispering about protests swelling outside. Darius's chance came at 3 in the morning, a rookie guard fumbling his keys, leaving the door ajar. He slipped the cuffs with a paperclip from the floor, a trick from Delta Force days, and moved like a ghost, disarming the kid with a twist of his wrist, gagging him with his own tie. The precinct's back exit loomed unguarded, and Darius bolted, stealing a radio from a desk, its static crackling as he vanished into the alleys. Boone's voice hissed through, "He's a dead man walking." Hargrove chuckled. "Let the town finish him." Darius reached a radio station 5 miles west, a squat brick building with a blinking tower, its signal strong enough to blanket Georgia. He broke in through a side window, glass crunching under his boots, the control room dark save for a glowing console. His hands shook, blood dripping onto the floor, but he patched into the broadcast, overriding the late-night ads with a stolen mic. "This is Darius Jackson," he rasped, his voice raw, steady. "Boone and Hargrove killed my dog, framed me for murder, turned this town against me. I've got files, proof, stolen from their own servers. They're liars, racists, killers. Listen." He played Carter's audio, Boone's smug confession, Hargrove's laugh, then cut the feed, uploading it all online from a burner USB. The nation woke to chaos, the broadcast viral by dawn, millions hearing his truth. Protests erupted coast to coast, hashtags flooding screens. Justice for Darius. End police lies. Federal agents swarmed the precinct, warrants in hand, cuffing Boone and Hargrove as cameras flashed, their faces pale, their bravado crumbling. Darius hid in a storm drain, watching the news on Lena's phone smuggled to him by a protester. "They're done," he muttered, a surge of triumph warming his chest, Titan's ghost barking in his mind. The town split, some cheering his stand, others howling for his blood, but the feds had the cops, the evidence airtight. He'd won, turned their frame into his weapon, stood tall when they'd buried him. But Boone and Hargrove didn't break alone. They shattered everything. At noon, a blast shook the earth, a fireball erupting from a black church 10 miles south, its steeple collapsing, screams piercing the air. Darius's phone buzzed, news. Live streaming the carnage. Bodies sprawled in the rubble, 30 dead, smoke choking the sky. The anchor's voice trembled. A bomb, linked to Darius Jackson, police say. Retaliation for his broadcast. Darius froze, his breath catching, the screen showing his face labeled terrorist. Boone stepped into frame, his splintered arm stiff, his voice oily. He's unhinged. This is what he does. Hargrove nodded, shotgun in hand. "We warned." "Him." Darius's stomach twisted, his hands trembling, the triumph ash in his mouth. He hadn't bombed anything. This was the militia, loyal to Boone, striking back with blood and fire. They'd planted his name, twisted his stand into a massacre, the town's racists their army. Protests flipped, crowds turning on him. Hero, becoming monster in hours. Lena's voice cracked over a call, smuggled through a burner. "They're saying you did it, Darius. I can't stop it." He heard her sob, the line cutting dead, her faith shaken. The feds released Boone and Hargrove by dusk, lack of evidence their shield. The church bombing a fog, erasing Carter's truth. Darius sank against the drain's wall, water lapping his boots, his Glock slipping from his hand. The broadcast had been his stand, a public cry to break their hold, and it had worked. The nation listening, the cops cuffed. Now it was a nightmare, 30 lives gone, his name a curse. Boone and Hargrove walked free, leading the hunt, their militia chanting, his death outside the drain's mouth. "Jackson's gotta pay!" a voice roared, torches flickering, rifles gleaming. Hargrove's laugh boomed. "He's ours now." He crawled deeper into the drain, mud caking his clothes, his ribs a cage of pain, his mind racing. The feds had come. The truth had rung out, but the militia's bomb had flipped it. Racial hate a tidal wave drowning his fight. Boone and Hargrove hadn't just survived. They'd turned his victory into a slaughter, the town their weapon, the nation their jury. He'd lost Lena's trust, the public's ear, his last shred of hope. The drain's darkness swallowed him, his breath ragged, Titan's ghost silent for the first time. Darius checked his Glock, the clip half empty, his resolve flickering but alive. They'd taken everything, burned his stand to ash, branded him, a killer of innocence. But he wasn't done. He'd survived jungles, ambushes, wars they couldn't imagine. This was their deadliest strike, a church in ruins, his name in blood, but he'd rise from this sewer, strike back harder. Boone and Hargrove thought they'd won, thought the hunt would end him. They didn't know the storm they'd unleashed, the man they'd forged in their fire. The war was bigger now, and they'd bleed for every soul they'd taken. What's your stance on this gut-wrenching twist? Drop a 1 in the comments if you think Darius's broadcast should have ended. Boone and Hargrove for good, not backfired like this. Smash that like button if you're rooting for him to claw out of this sewer and make them pay. And subscribe to catch his next move against this madness. Did the militia just seal their own fate by bombing that church? What happens when a man, with nothing left, loses even his name? Tune in for the next part to see the fallout. Darius Jackson crouched in the storm drain, the dank water lapping at his boots, his Glock slick with mud in his trembling hands. The church bombing's echo haunted him, 30 lives snuffed out, his name branded on the ashes by Boone and Hargrove's militia. The nation's outrage had flipped overnight, his broadcast's truth drowned in blood and fire. The cops free, hunting him with a town turned rabid. His ribs throbbed, his temple pulsed from the graze, but his Delta Force mind churned, plotting a way out. He couldn't run forever, not with Lena's faith shattered, not with the feds blind to the frame. He needed to clear his name, end this war. A fake surrender was his last play. He rigged his go-bag's last gadgets, a body cam stitched into his jacket, a hidden mic taped to his chest, both streaming to a cloud server he'd hacked days ago. "Evidence," he muttered, his voice a rasp in the drain's gloom. If he could trap Boone and Hargrove in a confession, live for the world to see, the bombing's lie would crack. He'd hand himself over, play the broken fugitive, let their arrogance spill the truth. Lena's burner buzzed in his pocket, a text flickering. "Feds are close. Don't do anything stupid." Too late. He crawled out, mud caking his face. The dawn grey and heavy with mist. The handover spot was a clearing 5 miles north, a dirt patch ringed by pines chosen for its open sightlines. Darius called a tip line from a stolen phone, his voice hoarse, deliberate. "Jackson here. I'm done running. Meet me at Miller's Crossing noon, bring the feds." He ditched the phone, hiking through the woods, his Glock holstered, his stance slouched to sell the ruse. By 11 he reached the clearing, kneeling in the center, hands raised, the body cam rolling. Engines rumbled, dust swirling as federal SUVs rolled in, agents spilling out, rifles trained on him. "Darius Jackson," one barked, a wiry man with a badge glinting. "On the ground now," Darius complied, dirt grinding into his knees, his voice steady. "I'm unarmed, check me." They frisked him, finding the Glock, confiscating it, but missing the cam and mic, their focus on his surrender. Boone and Hargrove emerged from a cruiser, their faces smug. Boone's splinted arm stiff, Hargrove's shotgun slung low. "Look at him," Boone sneered, stepping closer, his boots crunching gravel. "Big bad soldier crawling back to us." Hargrove chuckled, his thick neck bulging. "Should have stayed in that drain, Jackson." The feds watched, tense, their radios crackling, the scene live streaming to Darius's cloud, millions tuning in. Darius kept his head down, his voice low, broken. "I didn't bomb that church, you know it." Boone knelt, grabbing his chin, forcing his eyes up. "Oh, we know, but who's gonna believe you? You're a killer now." Hargrove leaned in, his breath sour with whiskey. "Carter, the church. All on you. Neat little package. Darius's pulse quickened, his mic catching every word. Why frame me? Titan wasn't enough? Boone's smirk widened, his voice a taunt. Dog was just the start. You're a message, Jackson. Black boys don't fight back round here. Hargrove laughed, clapping Boone's shoulder. Militia did the church. Our idea, your name, worked like a charm. Darius's fists clenched. Behind his back, the confession spilling, raw and unfiltered. You killed 30 people to bury me? Boone nodded, his eyes gleaming. And we'd do it again. Town's ours, you're nothing. The feds shifted, unease rippling, but they didn't move, their protocol a cage. Darius's stream hit 1 million views, comments flooding. They admitted it. Cops are monsters. The trap snapped shut, their words a noose around their necks. Boone stood, dusting his hands, oblivious to the mic. Time to wrap this up. Hargrove raised his shotgun, aiming at Darius's chest, his grin wide. Say hi to your mutt. Before he could fire, tires screeched, militia trucks roaring into the clearing, hoods stark against the noon sun. He's ours, a voice bellowed, rifles cracking, bullets tearing through the air. The feds dove for cover, returning fire, their SUVs riddled with holes. Darius rolled, breaking free, the chaos his shield. Boone shouted, "Take him out!" Hargrove fired, pellets grazing Darius's arm, blood blooming red. The militia swarmed, a dozen men with rifles and Molotovs, their chants a roar. "Kill the terrorist!" No mercy. They'd come for Darius, loyal to Boone, their bombing a bond sealed in hate. Feds fell, 3 agents crumpling, blood pooling in the dirt, their screams swallowed by gunfire. Darius sprinted for the trees, his arm burning, his ribs a cage of pain, the cam still rolling, capturing the massacre. A Molotov exploded behind him, flames licking the pines, smoke choking the air. He dove behind a trunk, his breath ragged. The stream cutting out, the footage lost in the blaze. Boone and Hargrove retreated, piling into a truck, their militia covering them, bullets pinging off bark. He did this, Boone yelled to the feds, his voice oily with lies. Ambushed us. Hargrove fired a last shot, shattering a fed's windshield, glass raining. The agents rallied, pinning the militia, but the cops slipped free, their truck peeling out, dust swirling in their wake. Darius stumbled deeper into the woods, his arm dripping blood, his chest heaving, the clearing a graveyard of feds and hoods, the confession torched with them. He reached a creek, collapsing against a rock, water soaking his boots, his vision blurring. The surrender had worked. Boone and Hargrove's words live for the world. Their guilt undeniable. Protests would flare, the feds would dig, the cops would fall. He'd felt invincible, the trap perfect, their arrest a heartbeat away. But the militia's massacre had flipped it, a hail of bullets and fire erasing his proof. The stream dead, the nation blind again. Boone and Hargrove walked free, their lie reborn. Jackson's ambush, the radio crackled, Hargrove's voice smug. He's armed and dangerous. Darius tore the cam from his jacket, its lens cracked, its battery fried, the mic a melted lump. His hands shook, blood mixing with creek water, his breath a jagged rasp. The feds would hunt him now, the militia's slaughter pinned on him, the confession a ghost in the ether. Lena's text burned in his mind. Don't do anything stupid. But he had, and it had cost everything. The clearing smoke drifted overhead, a shroud for his victory, the war spiraling beyond his grasp. Boone and Hargrove hadn't just survived. They'd turned his stand into a bloodbath, their power a hydra growing new heads. He staggered upright, leaning on the rock, his Glock lost in the fight, his go-bag gone. The creek's gurgle mocked him, Titan's silence a void, the town's hate a noose tightening. They'd taken his dog, his home, his name, and now his proof. 30 more lives on their ledger, his hands empty. But Darius wasn't broken. He'd survived deserts, jungles, ambushes they couldn't fathom. This was their deadliest blow, a massacre to bury him. But he'd rise from this creek, weaponless, hunted, a ghost they couldn't kill. The war wasn't over. It was a storm, and they'd drown in it next time. Darius Jackson stumbled through the Georgia woods, the creek's icy water still clinging to his boots, his arm a throbbing mess of blood and torn flesh from Hargrove's shotgun blast. The militia's massacre at the handover burned in his mind. Feds bleeding out in the dirt, his confession footage lost to fire and chaos. Boone and Hargrove had slipped free, their lie pinning the slaughter on him, the nation hunting a terrorist they'd forged. His ribs ached, his temple pulsed, but his Delta Force will held firm. A steel core beneath the pain, he'd lost everything. Titan, his cabin, Lena's trust, his name. This ended now. He trekked south, 10 miles through thick pines, scavenging. A hunter's blind for supplies, a rusted machete, a half-empty canteen, a coil of wire. His Glock was gone, his go-bag torched, but he'd make do. Boone and Hargrove hid in town, their militia a shield, but Darius knew their weakness, arrogance. They'd gloated at the handover, spilled their guilt, thinking him broken. He'd lure them out, trap them, force a confession on video again. This time he'd keep it. He rigged the wire into snares, his hands steady despite the blood loss. His plan a hunter's gambit. The old quarry, a jagged pit 15 miles west. Abandoned, isolated, perfect. Darius reached the quarry by dusk, its cliffs looming black against a bruised sky, gravel crunching underfoot. He planted snares along the trails, tripwires tied to rocks, a maze of chaos for the unwary. A stolen phone from the handover crackled to life, his voice a rasp as he called the precinct's tip line. "Jackson, I've got Boone, quarry off Route 12, come get me." He ditched the phone, climbing a ridge, his machete tucked into his belt, a cracked camcorder from the blind rigged to his chest, rolling. The bait was set. They'd come, too proud to resist, too cruel to stay away. Engines roared an hour later, 2 trucks grinding into the quarry, dust swirling in their headlights. Boone and Hargrove leapt out, Boone's splintered arm stiff, Hargrove's shotgun gleaming, 6 militia thugs at their heels, rifles cocked. "Where's the bastard?" Boone snarled, scanning the cliffs, his voice echoing off stone. Hargrove spat, his thick neck bulging. "Hiding like a rat, let's flush him out." Darius watched from the ridge, his breath steady, the camcorder's red light blinking. The first thug tripped a snare, a rock crashing down, splitting his skull, blood spraying the gravel. The militia scattered, shouting, "He's here! Get him!" Darius dropped, rolling into the pit, machete flashing as he slashed a second man's leg. Tendon snapping, the thug crumpling with a scream. Boone fired, bullets ricocheting off stone, his voice a roar. "You're dead, Jackson!" Hargrove charged, shotgun barking, pellets shredding a boulder as Darius ducked, flanking him, driving the machete's hilt into his gut. Hargrove doubled over, gasping, but Boone tackled Darius, his good fist slamming into his jaw, pain exploding white-hot. Darius twisted, kicking Boone's knee, the cop staggering, his splint cracking. The militia rallied, 3 left, rifles cracking, but Darius moved like a phantom, weaving through shadows, tripping another snare, rocks tumbling, crushing a thug's chest, his ribs snapping like twigs. 2 remained, panicked, firing wild, but Darius closed in, machete slicing one's arm, blood arcing, the man dropping with a wail. The last bolted, boots pounding gravel, leaving Boone and Hargrove alone, panting, cornered against a cliff. Darius loomed over them, machete dripping, his voice ice. "On your knees," Boone sneered, blood trickling from his lip, but he knelt, Hargrove collapsing beside him, clutching his side. Darius ripped the camcorder free, aiming it, his breath ragged. "Talk everything, Titan, Carter, the church, now!" Boone's eyes glinted, his voice a rasp. "You want it? Fine. We killed your mutt, planted the wrench on Carter, shot him ourselves. Church was us too, militia's bomb, your name on it. Happy?" Hargrove chuckled, wheezing. "You're still screwed, Jackson. No one will believe this." Darius's jaw tightened, the confession gold, his triumph surging. "They will now." He stepped closer, machete raised, ready to bind them, when a crack split the air, a sniper's bullet slamming into his chest. Pain erupted, a sledgehammer to his lungs, blood blooming red across his shirt as he staggered, the camcorder slipping, crashing against stone. Boone laughed, a hollow, victorious sound scrambling up. "Told you, you're done." Hargrove grinned, hauling himself free, his shotgun swinging. "Mayor's got our back." Darius fell to his knees, vision doubling, the sniper's perch hidden in the cliffs, a shadow he'd missed. Boone kicked the camcorder, its lens shattering, tape spilling, his voice smug. "No proof now, soldier boy." Hargrove aimed, but Darius lunged, machete slashing Hargrove's thigh, blood gushing, the cop howling as he dropped. Boone bolted, dragging Hargrove, their truck peeling out, gravel flying. Darius collapsed, clutching his chest, blood soaking the dirt, the snares silent, the militia gone. Headlights flashed, townsfolk arriving, finding Boone and Hargrove battered in a ditch miles away, their lie reborn. Jackson attacked us, left us for dead. Darius crawled, his breath a wet rasp, the quarry's silence swallowing him, the camcorder's ruins a taunt beside him. He'd beaten them, forced their truth, felt the win in his grasp, Boone's pleas a victory hymn. But the sniper, a hidden hand, had flipped it, a bullet stealing his proof, his life leaking into the gravel. Boone and Hargrove escaped, there, story spinning, the town blind again. His chest burned, each breath a battle, Titan's ghost fading in the dark. They thought he'd die here, thought they'd won. He clawed upright, staggering to a crevice, blood trailing behind, his Delta Force will a flicker in the void. The sniper was no militia grunt. This was bigger, someone pulling strings, protecting Boone and Hargrove with a scope and a slug. He'd missed it, too focused on the cops, too sure of his trap. The confession was ash, his stand a grave. But he wasn't dead yet. He tore his sleeve, packing the wound, his hands shaking, his resolve hardening. They'd pay, sniper and all. Their victory a mirage. The war wasn't over, it was a beast, and he'd feed it their bones next time. Darius Jackson lay crumpled in the quarry's crevice, blood pooling beneath him, the sniper's bullet a searing hole in his chest. The camcorder's shattered remains glinted beside him, Boone and Hargrove's confession lost to gravel and flame, their truck's taillights fading as they'd fled to the ditch. His breath came in wet, ragged gasps, his ribs a jagged cage, his arm numb from the handover's wound. The night pressed in, cold and heavy, the quarry's cliffs silent witnesses to his fall. Boone's laugh echoed in his skull. "Mayors got our back," a clue he'd missed, a shadow deeper than the cops. He wasn't dying here, not yet. Footsteps crunched above, soft, deliberate, not the militia's drunken stagger. Darius tensed, his hand fumbling for the machete, its blade slick with Hargrove's blood. A figure loomed, a woman in a medic's vest, her face obscured by a hood, her voice low. "You're a mess, Jackson." She knelt, her hands steady, pulling gauze from a pack, pressing it to his chest. Pain flared, a white-hot spike, but he didn't flinch, his Delta Force grit locking his jaw. "Who are you?" he rasped, suspicion prickling. "Name's Riley, ex-army, heard your broadcast, been tracking you since." She stitched the wound, her needle flashing, blood soaking her gloves. "You've got enemies bigger than those pigs." Darius's vision cleared, the pain sharpening his mind, Boone's words clicking into place. "Mayor?" Riley nodded, tying off the suture, her eyes hard. "Vernon Tate. Runs this town like a kingpin. Funds Boone and Hargrove, keeps 'em. Untouchable. You were getting too close." She handed him a canteen, water splashing his cracked lips. "Tate's the sniper's boss. Ex-military hire, probably. Meant to finish you." Darius drank, his throat burning, the pieces falling. Together. Tate, the puppet master, rigging elections, silencing black voters, shielding the cops' reign. The church bombing, Carter's death, all his threads. He staggered upright, leaning on the crevice wall, Riley steadying him, her grip firm. "Why, help me?" She shrugged, her voice flat. "Tate's filth. I've seen his kind overseas crushing. Folks for power. You're a wrench in his machine." Darius nodded, his chest a furnace of pain, his resolve steeling. He'd beaten Boone and Hargrove, forced their truth, but Tate's bullet had stolen it, a higher hand flexing. "Need proof," he muttered, his voice a growl. Riley pulled a burner phone from her pack, its screen glowing. "Got a lead. Tate's. Office downtown, files maybe, if you can walk." They trekked through the woods, Darius limping, Riley scouting ahead, the quarry receding into the night. His chest throbbed, blood seeping through the gauze, but he moved, each step a defiance of Tate's aim. By dawn, they reached a gas station, Riley hot-wiring a rusted sedan, its engine coughing to life. "Tate's spinning it already," she said, flipping the radio on. A news anchor's voice droned. "Jackson killed a deputy in a quarry ambush. Boone and Hargrove, heroic survivors, mourn their fallen." Darius's fists clenched, nails drawing blood. The ditch from part 1 now a stage. His death there. Script. They hit town at noon, the sedan blending with traffic, the precinct swarming with feds, protesters chanting, "Where's Jackson?" Tate's office sat 3 blocks east, a brick building with tinted windows, its flag snapping in the E. Wind. Riley parked a street over, handing Darius a lockpick. "3rd floor corner suite, I'll watch the door." He slipped inside, a ghost in a hoodie, his chest a drumbeat of pain, the machete tucked under his jacket. The lobby was empty, a guard, dozing, and Darius took the stairs, each step a battle, blood dripping onto the concrete. Tate's office reeked of cigar smoke, its oak desk piled with papers, a safe humming in the corner. Darius picked the lock, his hands trembling, the safe clicking open to reveal files. Voter Suppression 2024, Precinct Funding, Operation Clean Sweep. He skimmed, his pulse racing, pages detailing payoffs to Boone and Hargrove. Orders for the church bombing, Carter's hit, all signed VT. A USB drive sat taped beneath, labeled insurance. Darius pocketed it, his breath hitching, the proof a lifeline. Tate's voice boomed outside, "Secure the building." Footsteps pounded, Riley's warning text buzzing, "Run!" He bolted, the files stuffed in his jacket. The USB a weight against his chest, but Tate's militia stormed the stairs, rifles gleaming, hoods stark. Darius dove into a janitor's closet, his chest screaming, blood soaking his shirt. There, boots thundering past. He slipped out, crashing through a window, glass cutting his arms, landing in an alley. The sedan gone, Riley vanished. Sirens wailed, the town locking down. Tate's voice on the radio. "Jackson's dead. Heroic shootout. Boone and Hargrove avenged our deputy." Darius staggered into a dumpster, his breath a wet rasp, the lies swallowing him. The news hit hard. Headlines screaming, "Fugitive killed in standoff." Cops hailed as heroes. Boone and Hargrove stood at a press conference, their faces bruised but smug. Boone's splinter badge, Hargrove's shotgun a prop. "He came at us," Boone lied, his voice oily. "We had no choice." Hargrove nodded, his grin wide. "Town's safe now." Darius's death was gospel, his body lost in the quarry, the feds pulling back, the protests fading. Lena's voice cracked on air, "He's gone." Her grief a blade in his gut, her trust torched by Tate's play. Darius hid in a sewer, the USB clutched in his hand, Riley's words echoing. "Bigger than those pigs." Tate had framed him, as a ghost erased him, his militia hunting survivors who knew the truth. Jamal, Lena, anyone who'd seen his fight. He hacked a public Wi-Fi with the burner, the USB revealing audio, Tate ordering, "Bury Jackson. Church was a start. Make him a myth." Boone's laugh crackled. "He's done, boss." Darius's chest burned, blood crusting his fingers. The file's a lifeline he couldn't use, not yet. Tate's sniper had missed his heart, but this strike hit deeper, his existence wiped, his allies lost. He sank against the sewer wall, water pooling around him, his breath a struggle. Titans. Ghost silent. Boone and Hargrove were pawns, Tate the king, his power a web strangling Georgia. The quarry had been his stand, the confession his win. But Tate's bullet and lie had flipped it, a checkmate he hadn't seen. His cabin, his name, his proof, all ash. The town a graveyard for his fight. Riley was gone, maybe dead. Her help, a flicker snuffed out. He'd survived, but at what cost? Darius gripped the USB, his hands trembling, his Delta Force will a ember in the dark. They thought he was dead, thought they'd won, their heroic tale a shield. But ghosts haunted, and he'd rise from this sewer, a specter they couldn't kill. Tate's empire loomed, Boone and Hargrove its fists, the war a beast he'd feed. He'd heal, strike, expose them all, the USB his ace, his vengeance a storm brewing. They'd taken everything, but he'd take it back, piece by piece until their world burned. The fight wasn't over, it was a reckoning, and they'd face it soon. Darius Jackson hunched in the sewer, the fetid water soaking his boots, his chest a throbbing furnace where the sniper's bullet had torn through. The USB drive rested heavy in his hand, its files a ticking bomb. Vernon Tate's orders, Boone and Hargrove's crimes, the church bombing's blueprint. His breath rasped, blood crusting his shirt, the town above chanting his death like a hymn. Tate had erased him, branded him a ghost, the militia hunting survivors who knew his truth. Riley's rescue had faded into silence, her fate unknown. Lena's grief a public dirge on the radio, but Darius wasn't dead, not yet. He'd end this, burn Tate's empire, make them all pay. He staggered upright, leaning on the slimy wall, his Delta Force will aflame flickering through the pain. Tate's victory gala loomed that night, a celebration of his heroic cops, Boone and Hargrove, at the mayor's mansion downtown. Darius hacked a public Wi-Fi with the burner phone, uploading the USB's audio to a dark web stream, rigging it to go live at 9 sharp. He'd infiltrate, plant the files, expose Tate to the world, let the confession bury them. His chest screamed, his ribs a cage of splinters, but he moved, a shadow limping through the sewers, the machete tucked into his belt, his last weapon. The mansion sat on a hill, its marble steps gleaming under floodlights, a crowd of suits and gowns spilling across the lawn. Darius emerged from a storm grate a block away, mud caking his face, his hoodie a shroud. He slipped through the woods, flanking the estate, his breath shallow, each step a battle. Guards patrolled, rifles slung low, militia hoods swapped for, tuxes, their eyes sharp. He waited, counting their rounds, then darted, scaling a trellis, its vines cutting his palms, blood dripping onto the leaves. The second-floor window beckoned, its latch loose, and he pried it open, tumbling into a study, the air thick with cigar smoke and leather. Tate's desk loomed, a mahogany beast piled with papers, a laptop glowing in the corner. Darius planted the USB, his hands trembling, syncing it to the stream, the audio primed to blast. Tate's voice, "Barry Jackson, church was a start." Boone's laugh, "He's done, boss." He hacked the gala's AV system, routing the feed to every screen, every speaker, his chest a drumbeat of pain, his vision blurring. The clock hit 8:55, voices drifting from below, Tate's toast ringing. "To our heroes Boone and Hargrove, who saved us from a monster." Applause thundered, a knife in Darius's gut. At 9, the stream erupted, screens flickering. Tate's confession booming through the mansion. Voter suppression, precinct funding, clean sweep, the files scrolled. Names, dates, payoffs, the church bombing's order in Tate's scrawl. Guests gasped, glasses shattering, Boone's face paling, Hargrove's shotgun clattering to the floor. Darius watched from the study, a grim smile cracking his lips, blood dripping onto the carpet. Feds stormed in, badges flashing, cuffs snapping. On Tate, his roar drowned by shouts, "You're under arrest!" Boone and Hargrove bolted, militia guards tackled, their hero masks torched. The nation saw it live, millions streaming, protests flaring anew, justice for Darius trending, the town's lie unraveling. Boone and Hargrove faced life. No parole, their precinct gutted. Tate's empire ash, his voter scams a federal case. Darius slipped downstairs, a ghost in the chaos, his chest a furnace, his breath a wet rasp. He'd won, turned Tate's gala, into their grave. The USB his blade, justice a storm he'd unleashed. The mansion's doors swung wide, feds swarming, reporters clamoring, and Darius staggered into the night, his victory a heavy weight, Titan's ghost barking in his mind. He reached the woods leaning on a pine, blood soaking his shirt, the adrenaline fading, his knees buckling. Sirens wailed, the town a blur of red and blue, but a figure loomed, not a Fed, not militia. Lena stepped from the shadows, her suit torn, her braids loose, her eyes blazing with something darker than grief. "You did this," she hissed, her voice a blade, a pistol trembling in her hand. Darius froze, his breath catching, the victory souring. "Lena?" She shook her head, tears streaking her face, her voice breaking. "You destroyed us. Jamal's dead, hunted down. I lost everything, defending you." His stomach dropped, the USB's triumph crumbling, Lena's words a bullet worse than Tate's sniper. "I had to," he rasped, his hands raised, blood dripping. "They killed Titan Carter, the church." Lena's laugh was sharp, hollow, her gun steady. "And you killed me. The militia's mine now. They follow me, not Tate. You made me this." Darius's mind reeled, the reversal a sledgehammer, Lena's betrayal a twist he'd never seen. She'd turned, her grief a weapon, the town's hate her army, his fight her ruin. "Lena, no," he pleaded, stepping closer, his chest screaming, his voice raw. "We can fix this." She fired, the bullet slamming into his shoulder, pain exploding, blood spraying the pine. He staggered, falling to his knees, his breath a wet gasp, her face a mask of rage and sorrow. "No fixing this," she whispered, her gun lowering, her eyes glistening. "You're done, Darius." She vanished into the woods, her footsteps fading, the militia's chants rising in the distance, her voice their new echo. Darius collapsed, blood pooling beneath him, the night swallowing him, his chest a furnace, his shoulder a shred of flesh. The USB had won the war. Tate jailed, Boone and Hargrove caged, justice a bitter fruit. But Lena's shot was the twist, her betrayal the cost. He'd risen from the sewer, exposed the beast, thought he'd triumphed, but she'd flipped it. The sister he'd fought for now his hunter, the militia hers. His breath slowed, his vision dimming, Titan's ghost silent, the woods a grave or a cradle he couldn't tell. He clawed at the dirt, his hands trembling, the machete slipping from his belt, blood mixing with mud. The feds would find Tate. The cops would rot, but Lena's war loomed, a storm he'd birthed, her gun his reckoning. He'd survived deserts, snipers, bombs, but this broke him, her face the last blow, his victory a pyre. Was he alive? Dead? The night didn't answer, the wind whistling through the pines, his blood a river in the earth. Justice had come, but at a price he couldn't pay, the war's end a question mark, his fate a shadow bleeding out. This story unveils raw truths about resilience, betrayal, and the cost of fighting systemic injustice. Darius Jackson's journey teaches us that courage can ignite change, even against overwhelming odds. A Black Delta Force veteran, he faced relentless racial injustice, his dog Titan's murder, false accusations, and a town-turned predator. Yet he rose each time, wielding his skills to expose corruption. His persistence shows that one voice armed with truth can topple empires, as seen when he brought down Mayor Vernon Tate and cops Boone and Hargrove. However, the tale warns that victories are fragile. Darius's triumph crumbled under Lena's shocking betrayal, her grief twisting into vengeance as she led the militia against him. This reversal underscores how deeply racism poisons even the closest bonds, turning allies into enemies when despair festers unchecked. The story also reveals the peril of unseen power. Tate's shadow loomed larger than the cops, a reminder that injustice often hides behind polished facades, manipulating systems to crush resistance. Darius's near-death survival, bleeding in the woods, reflects the brutal price of defiance, yet his ambiguous fate suggests hope endures, even in darkness. We learn that justice isn't clean or certain. It's a war with losses as heavy as winds. For every Boone jailed, a Lena may rise, her pain a new battlefield. The lesson is clear. Fighting hate demands vigilance, sacrifice, and an unflinching heart, but the scars it leaves can reshape everything we hold dear. What do you think? Can justice ever heal the wounds it creates? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if Darius's fight moved you, and subscribe for more gripping tales of truth and triumph. Share this story if you stand against corruption. Thanks for joining this journey. May you find strength to face your own battles and hope in the shadows they cast.